One of the most controversial discussions in the Sakamoto Days community right now is whether or not Shin is strong enough to even stand a chance and hang in a battle against Tenkyu. Whereas previously, Shin was able to stand in the same room and fight against threats like Kumanomi when he had help, or even 1v1 extremely difficult opponents like Haruma before. Two characters who definitely overpower Shin when it comes to higher physical stats, experience, and the long-range advantage they have in fighting. Not only was Shin very under-leveled in these fights, and was more so able to keep up with his opponents by making use of the environment and coming up with some special way to exploit his ESP benefit. Examples are when he realizes that Haruma is focusing his fighting style on sports and chooses to predict what game and what rules needed to be played according to the games that Haruma is emulating. And also, Shin did have his sonic glove with him in that fight, which allowed him to blow Haruma's eardrums and deliver much more critical blows than Shin is capable of at this very moment. And despite the prison arc supposedly being this big solo training story for Shin, the only actual growth we've seen from Shin is his defeat of Joe Shackles. Shin should definitely be at a disadvantage in this scrap against Tenkyu, especially without any help and coming at it alone. However, with the new knowledge that his mental commands only work on an opponent once, Shin resolves to use every aspect of his ESP to stay in the battle for as long as possible. Combining the use of his future sight, which allows him to subconsciously predict an opponent's motor functions before the thought even reaches their neural network, and now that his body has received enough training to somewhat keep pace physically with a threat like Tenkyu, Shin is surprisingly, at the very least, drawing the battle to a stalemate. Every arrow that Tenkyu fires is getting dodged, and even when Tenkyu tries to innovate his style by snapping his bowstring and whipping it around to cause AoE damage, Shin is still able to properly anticipate where Tenkyu's coming from and counterattack effectively. And one thing that I do want to point out is something that we did learn from the brief cuts to Sakamoto and his current training arc with Torres on the side. Something that Kendaka explicitly tells Sakamoto before everyone goes into their training arcs is that regimented practice can really only do so much for a person. Sakamoto was at his physical limit. Sparring with Kendaka and going through specific drills isn't going to bring Sakamoto any further in his goal, especially now that he has surpassed and learned everything he can about Kendaka. Kendaka claimed what Sakamoto actually needs is real-time fighting experience with someone on order level. Practice is not going to put you in a situation that real life will. Sakamoto needs to fight someone that he can't predict and will put him on the edge. Constantly practicing the same situation will never have someone grow or develop. You are just perfecting and replicating the same result over and over again. As soon as something changes or a unique event happens, all that practice goes out the window. It's part of the reason Torres works so well as a training partner for Sakamoto. Since Torres doesn't actually want to kill Sakamoto so he can just keep raising his bounty higher and higher, Sakamoto can fight someone who keeps him on his toes as many times as he wants without the risk of death. And with Sakamoto's lesson from Torres being that he relies way too much on luck and not the consistent skills in his arsenal that housekeeping give him, Shin's lesson does seem to be somewhat similar, where the Dortoragonist is constantly searching for ways he can exploit the environment or just overwhelm his opponent physically like his master Sakamoto. Shin should be finding excuses to make ESP put him at an advantage over the opponent instead. So with the new knowledge that his mental commands only work once, we see Shin turn all of his other weapons on to 100%, such as Future Sight. But more importantly, we see Shin find a way to work around the single-use limit of his mental commands. Because it's obvious that Shin is still weaker than Tenkyu when it comes to experience and strength overall, on top of the fact that Tenkyu himself is also a very intelligent combatant that is more than willing to improvise as well, Tenkyu will always maintain that stat advantage. Which also means as the fight goes on longer, Shin isn't the only one learning and adapting as he fights. Tenkyu is continually running into Shin's Future Sight traps and realizing that if he just launches attacks at random, it will become impossible for Shin to keep up. And it's here that this battle becomes a tug of war to see who can surpass the other before it's way too late. Right when Tenkyu makes this discovery and starts kicking up large volleys of rubble to confuse Shin and injure his leg, Shin levels up his thinking and responds by realizing he can actually mentally command himself. Even if it does only work once, he can use the mental command to overwrite his brain's senses that are telling him his injured leg cannot move, forcing forcing himself to lift his body off the ground and leap at Tenkyu, despite his injuries supposed to be incapacitating him. However, anyone that was worried about the potential power scaling problems that Shin handling Tenkyu would cause can all rest assured that that will not be happening, because it's revealed at the end of the chapter that Tenkyu has just been holding back this entire time. The eye patch that Tenkyu has been designed with was revealed not to just be for show and to make him look like a pretty cool pirate, as it's actually a handicap on his archery skills in general. So Tenkyu isn't just an emotionless killer and psychopath. He is a Kenpachi type character that literally holds his strength back to make sure his fights are more fun, which is more scary than anything, and man, was already terrifying. By lifting this eye patch, a fully present eye is revealed. No injuries, scars, or damage, except the only difference that makes this eye look different is its iris is a lot blacker than average and the other one. Tenkyu does make a comment at first about having both of his eyes open, making him feel woozy, but his vision is clearer than ever, showing that this special eye of Tenkyu's may actually be some form of supernatural ability, something he's only able to use once or twice without suffering exhaustion, or Tenkyu, it might just be an even deeper psychopath than we thought. Either way, with the reveal that Shin has only been facing Tenkyu at 50% and is already heavily on the back foot with injuries all around, with Tenkyu's new power-up, it's unknown how Shin will be able to match Tenkyu's tenacity from this point on, as once the curled arrow that Tenkyu fired with both eyes lands on Shin, it proves an even bigger gap between the two assassins power-wise. Where Shin's ESP range can only extend so far, Tenkyu with his second eye bestows him with a huge buff and attack range that supersedes Shin's ESP. And now that his advantage in range is confirmed, Tenkyu can fire as many lethal arrows at Shin without Shin ever knowing where they're gonna come from or when they'll be fired, clearing Shin's ESP from the fight entirely and making it null and void. And I have to reiterate, considering Shin's ESP and his future sight was the only reason he was even keeping pace with Tenkyu as it was, there is no way in sight for me that would allow Shin to come out of this fight without him gaining some kind of crazy extra level up for ESP or beating that one-time restriction for mental commands. As not only are Shin's injuries preventing him from fighting at 100%, with his leg wound not letting him move the way he wants, his exhaustion is also very clear, and without ESP, he has no advantages or handicaps. Now, one thing we did get last chapter is the arrival of Torres, the Order member that has been training with Sakamoto, which means it's possible there may be a rescue crew that's coming to Shin in his fight, or at the very least, someone may come and give him enough time to unlock that level of ESP that he's missing. Theorized from the very beginning, may give Atari a chance to fight alongside Shin or help him adapt and level up that ESP in a way he never would have thought before. We've already seen Atari come in clutch, and knowing that she's still got one good lucky move left, well, I'm gonna have to hope and say it's gonna be one for Shin to win this. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Shin getting help in this scenario, and with this being a big solo Shin arc, I was really hoping he would be able to handle everything on his own, because not for nothing, it seems like every fight or serious battle that Shin gets into, he needs help to do it, or just needs someone to clean up the mess for him. Haruma was like the closest we got to him actually succeeding and getting a pretty decent win on his own, and then we have him win Joe Shackles just for Tenkyu to be introduced, and at no fault of Shin, Tenkyu was just brought up to be way too powerful. If Tenkyu was a little bit more grounded, I think it wouldn't be so hard to believe Shin could win this fight here. But with how fucking insane Tenkyu seems, it almost seems kind of impossible without help at this point. We'll have to wait and see. My opinions are my opinions. I'm mostly more interested in hearing what you have to say. So don't forget to leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. Hit that like button if you haven't already, because it really helps the channel and this video way more than you know. If you enjoy watching Sakamoto chapter reviews weekly, make sure you subscribe. Check out any other series you may read as well on the channel. Don't be scared to check out the main channel where you can find a lot of other things. That's enough, guys. I will see you in the next Sakamoto Days review next week. Peace, peace.